let's talk about War and Peace. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This was Bean's Big Book Bash pick for February. If you are new to my channel, hello, I am Jenna. I'm trying to remember to say my own name when I talk here because my channel name is Chicky Bean, but that is not my name. At the end of last year, decided that I had all of these huge books on my TBR and that if I didn't make a plan to actually read them, I was never going to read them. So I picked 12 for the year of 2022 and I'm going to read them, and then I put them in order by publication year. Last month in January, we read The Count of Monte Cristo, and this month we read War and Peace. In March, currently I am reading Forever Amber and absolutely loving it. I'm loving it and I'm so excited because Count of Monte Cristo was kind of like awesome plateau drop. That's how I felt about it. This one was just kind of down here the entire time. No highs, no lows. And yeah, this was my first read of War and Peace. For Bean's Big Book Bash, I always post in my link tree a link to a Google Doc, which has all sorts of resources in it, poems that relate to it, sometimes songs that relate to it, but definitely and always questions. So that is what I'm going to do. This is my messy journal for War and Peace. And I have those questions and I'm just going to go through them one at a time. So heads up, there might be some spoilers. I know so many people are reading this book right now. If you're in the middle of it and you don't want spoilers, then maybe don't watch. But also, I don't think it'll get too incredibly spoilery. My responses to these questions don't go incredibly deep because I didn't have incredibly deep feelings about this book. The first question is, what is Tolstoy's attitude toward his female characters? So basically, I don't know how well I can separate my reading of Anna Karenina from War and Peace. I feel like Tolstoy just writes the same story over and over and over with different characters. So let me just talk about Tolstoy's women in general. I feel like he relegates them to three possible categories. There is the spinster. There is the woman who redeems herself through motherhood and marriage, whether that's a happy marriage or not. And then there is the woman who seeks her own happiness and receives death and disfigurement. Those are our choices, ladies. Happy picking. Yeah. Now, here is the other thing that really drives me nuts about Tolstoy is that he's such a hypocrite. He's such a hypocrite because while he's writing War and Peace, he's literally helping his own sister get a divorce and establish herself in society as an acceptable woman. And within the world of his books, these women who seek their own happiness are given a raw deal. Additionally, he's also a hypocrite because if you have a woman in his books who, or his sister in real life, who receives some kind of reciprocation, some kind of effect for the cause of seeking their own happiness that is in any way positive or freeing, you also have to look at the empowering aspect there. And Tolstoy did not, as a general rule, believe in empowering women. His own wife was subservient to him. He had these acolytes that followed him in his old age when he decided he was a sage. Hello, you don't get to decide you're a sage. I mean, I know he did, and I know people do, but like that's called a cult. And he had these women who followed him weirdly, and you know, some of them were his favorite translators. But they were not his translators, they were his worshipers. I just find it really weird and gross. And also, he has all sorts of writing in his personal journals and in other things about how valueless, really, women are and how they're good for one or two things, you know, one or two things. And I just don't like him. I don't like him. and I don't like the way he writes women. I like some of his women. I do. I'm human. I definitely like some of his women, and I think we'll hear more about that as I go through my notes here, but I don't like him. I don't like him. Sorry if you love him. I just don't. Also, universally, he dismisses, this is in his own life and in his books, like he dismisses the ability of a woman to be an intellectual. So yes, I just got done saying that some of his favorite translators were women, but they were his followers. They were saying his words, not writing their own. So there is a big distinction there. He discounts women as intellectuals. He does not believe, and he does not write, and he does not reward intelligence in women, ever. An intelligent woman is a target in his books. And I just, I don't like it. Okay, so question number 2. Pierre's passionate attachment to the world of ideas takes him from one enthusiasm to another, from free-thinking Francophile to philanthropic Freemason to would-be assassin of the Antichrist Napoleon. What do you think Pierre is searching for? Why is he invariably ineffective when trying to translate his enthusiasm into practical results? And how has he changed by the end of the book? So what's he looking for? He is absolutely looking for meaning, for purpose, for validation, for his existence. He's looking for something bigger than himself. And how has he changed by the end of the book? Well, he's changed through his interactions with a peasant. The only peasant in the 2 gigantic books that I've read by Tolstoy, and the over 2,500 pages that I've read from Tolstoy, the only peasant that is a fully developed character, and yet still an archetypal ideal of what Tolstoy thinks peasants are. And so this is another problem I have with Leo Tolstoy. I do not like the way he elevates while mocking the upper ruling class of which he is a part. Again, we have a lack of integrity here. We have a lack of honorable intention. He's very much judging the aristocracy of which he is a part. And then he, in his old age, when he decides that he is some sort of spiritual sage, he decides, mind you, when he decides he's some sort of spiritual sage that people should follow, he pretends, he plays at, much like Marie Antoinette with her little farm there behind Versailles, pretends that he is one of the farm folk, one of the peasants. But he's still Leo Tolstoy. He's still this very wealthy man. He's still an aristocrat with all of the expectations that society will serve him. He's playing a game of dress up. And so to read so little of the people who he claims determine history in his book, to see it all mostly only through the eyes of the aristocracy is a huge flaw in my mind. And so Pierre, his transformation comes about through his interactions with a peasant, who I'll talk about more with another question. Without that iron sharpens iron kind of relationship, Pierre would not have found peace. He would not have found a life in his mind. He's looking for life outside of himself, and this man shows him that it's actually in here. So first he's looking for pleasure, then he's looking for community and service, and then he's looking for political validation. But he has to learn that his validation and his worth comes from inside of himself, and that's what he gains through his interactions with this peasant. And that's how he changes by the end of the book. So speaking of that peasant, the next question 3. Platon Karatev, I'm sorry, I butcher all these names. I'm so sorry. The peasant who befriends Pierre while both are captives of the French is a catalyst for Pierre's transformation into a happy man. What does the worldly, sophisticated Pierre learn from this humble man? I've already answered that. And is there something uniquely Russian about Karatayev? And how does he compare with the other peasants described in the book, such as those at Bald Hills, the Bulkonsky estate? Okay, so I've already addressed a lot of that. So let's just talk about Platon. Platon, which I say with a French accent, so much of this book is French. So, I mean, we know that French was the official royal language around the world. French was, how we use English today. It was like the common language that was spoken by people all over Europe. And so, yes, French it's everywhere. And I say Platon with a French accent, even though that's probably not how you say it at all. But I did look it up because it reminded me of Plato, and he is our philosopher. And I was rewarded by learning that, yes, his name is the Russian variant of Plato. The only peasant Tolstoy gives life to, this is what I've written, he's an archetype of what Tolstoy thinks the peasantry is, which is simple and life-affirming, and Platon equals Plato in Russian. He is living proof that contentment is attainable despite circumstance. And some of the things, like I drew a little, it's very messy, so I won't show you, but I drew a Venn of him and Pierre. So Pierre I have, he's rich, he's depressed, he's stuck in the past, he's fearful of the future. And then and the only thing they have in common is that they're both Russian. And war. And then on the other side for our Russian Plato here, I have that he's poor, he's full of light, he's happy, he is light, and he lives in the moment. And I think that's the key thing there. He lives in the moment, and he is more attuned to individuals and beings that live in the moment. Thus, you see him with his little dog, and he's just, he's not trying to amount a reserve of riches for himself. He's enjoying what comes now. And he's not trying to create a reserve of financial wealth or of spiritual wealth. It's just about now. Now. Where's the joy now? Where's the peace now? Regardless of circumstance. And like I've already said, this is an inner manifestation of those things. Question number 4. Andrei Bulkonsky, I think I said that right. His pride keeps him from stooping to the politicking and the self-promotion of other staff officers and court officials, and yet it also poisons his relationship with his wife, Lise, with his sister Mara, and for much of the book with his one-time fiancée, Natasha. How does a terrible wound and a lingering illness change his attitude toward Mara, Natasha, and life in general? So what I've written is this. He is intellectual and he's analytical. He's devoted to Russia. He's extremely patriotic, but he's also detached. He's self-reflective and honest with himself, but he flinches when touched physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And not even Natasha, who I do think he loved. I do. But not even Natasha can save him from himself. Antisocial in all possible ways. And untouchable, unapproachable. And so he also doesn't want to put himself out there to receive that kind of attention or affection. He wants to be, he's an extreme of what saves Pierre. Like he manifests his own reality, and he becomes entrapped in that. And then you have Tolstoy. This is question number 5. Tolstoy advances his own theory of history. I've already mentioned a little bit, I hinted at my response here. But he advances his own theory of history through the book, and he devotes his entire second epilogue to elaborating and defending it. What do you think about his theory of history? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I feel like I'm looking down an awful lot. I'm going to try and look up a little more. But my notes, they're written. Okay, so history is a battle. There is no direction. There is no pattern. There is no direct cause and effect of history. That's unknowable. Any attempt to write about and explain the past is a lie. trying to capture it or explain how something came about through the decisions of important individuals becomes a lie or becomes a falsehood, because it's impossible to claim that history is determined only by the bigwigs, which, again, why are we looking at this story only through the eyes of the wealthy and the bigwigs? Napoleon, like, why? There's something there. I'm not getting it. Anyway, history is the total of an infinite number of, this is a quote from somebody else and I neglected to write down who said it, but history is the sum total of an infinite number of small decisions made by ordinary people whose actions are too unremarkable to document. That's his history. That's his theory of history. And then ironically, he goes and tries to document it using only the upper class. I don't know. Again, I don't know. Okay, number 6. Napoleon and Kutuzov are a study in contrast, and it's clear who Tolstoy thinks is the better man and the better general. How does Kutuzov achieve victory at Borodino and ultimately in Russia, and do you think his style of leadership is truly best in all circumstances? Okay, so I've written down some notes here. They're not incomplete thoughts or ideas. So I've got Tolstoy's view. So I feel like Tolstoy superimposes over himself. I feel like he feels very akin to this man, and so it's hard to distinguish where Tolstoy takes over and where he begins and where Kutuzov ends, and vice versa. But he depicts him this way, which I do find interesting, as old and fat and one-eyed, which is probably historically accurate, and yet it's not what you would think of. It's kind of the antithesis of what you might anticipate a hero to be. And here's where I think you see Tolstoy writing himself in. He's a brilliant strategist. He's a philosopher. He's humble. He's spiritual. After Borodino, he is reticent to declare anything one way or the other, victory or loss, because the situation is so complex, more complex than anyone can understand. So how can you label it? And then he kneels to God after the battle. He's wary and he is uncertain. I think that these are all things that Tolstoy is. And so, of course, he thinks that he's a better man because he's Tolstoy, basically. Not that I'm pro-Napoleon in any way, shape, or form, but I think history does prove that Napoleon was quite a good general. And I've done a lot of reading. In fact, you can see right back here, you've got Wellington sitting right there. I've done a lot of reading about Napoleon and Wellington, but not so much this man, seeing it through the eyes of the Duke of Wellington. And Wellington was obsessed with Napoleon, not just as his adversary, but because he was such an amazing general. So it's questionable. Tolstoy, your beliefs are questionable here. But that's the man. Question number 7. There's just a couple left. Question number 7. What does Tolstoy have to say about the foibles, follies, and strengths of Russia's ruling class? So I said a lot about this, so I'm just going to move forward to question number 8. His book is overflowing with vivid scenes. So what are some of my favorite? So I've got 1, 2, 3. I mean, I cannot fault his writing. I do believe the man can turn a phrase. He can paint a vivid picture. Just because I do not like the man, and just because I do not like, ultimately, the book, doesn't mean that I don't like the writing. So I do, actually. There's quite a few things that I really loved, but 3 of them that stood out to me that I wrote down here are when Anatole meets Mara and cannot stop comparing her or complaining about how plain she is. And then the whole character and story arc of Helene. She is detestable and sympathetic. Her story, spoiler, ends in what I think is probably a suicide. I know it can be read multiple different ways, but I do think it is a suicide as she tries to abort her baby. It's really interesting to me to be reading Forever Amber, in which, spoiler, there is an unexpected pregnancy for an unwed mother. And there's a scene in Forever Amber which takes place during the Restoration period, so before this time period. But there's a scene in Forever Amber where she is going through London and she sees a woman naked from the waist up being chased through the city and being whipped. And she asks what for, and mentions how terrible it is. And it's because this woman is an unwed mother. I did not know that that was a common punishment in England during the Restoration period for unwed mothers, but apparently it was. And so fast forward 100 or more years to see Helene feel that this is her option is pretty devastating. And also to realize that not a whole lot has changed for women. Not a whole lot. She is a woman who seeks what she wants. And she's atrocious. She's absolutely atrocious. You don't have to be an atrocious person to seek what you want. But, you know, she gets what she wants. She hurts people along the way. I'm not saying she is lovable. But she is who she is because she has to be in order to, well, this sounds stupid, but this is what I was going to say. She is who she is because she has to be who she is in her time. Yeah. Anyway, so Helene's whole story arc and her character. And then when Pierre and Natasha are reunited it was a good moment for me. And at a time when I was really struggling to even care about finishing this book, that was good. That was good for me. And then the last question that I answered here is, what do you think Tolstoy would make of our present day leaders and their attitudes toward history, war, and peace? And I wrote, he'd be judgmental and feel superior. If it's not perfectly clear, I am not a Leo Tolstoy fan. So those are my thoughts, and that is my experience with finally reading War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I am so much more enjoying Forever Amber. And I will continue on with reading Forever Amber and enjoying my time with her. Anyway, those are my thoughts on War and Peace, and I know a lot of people are reading it right now. Please don't let me influence you in any way, shape, or form. If you love it, more power to you. I know that I am in the minority, I think. I think a lot of people who actually read War and Peace do love it. I'm not one of them, and that's okay. Bye.